Hello and welcome to our sofa chat with the very, very lovely Kenda. Kenda and I have been friends, is it about 4 years or so now,
Oh
Kenda?
God, you know what, Sally or Susie? I think it's longer than that.
Oh dear. Well, that's life, isn't
Time
it?
flies.
Kendra and I both in the hypnosis industry. And Kendra, you're in Florida now, aren't you? But
I am in
yes,
Florida.
but you're
I'm
Canadian.
I am Canadian.
Yeah.
I was born in Ottawa, Ontario, and moved to Illinois, Iowa, Midwest, and now I'm in Florida.
Oh, fantastic. Do you know, I really want to come over to your landmass. I've only been to Toronto and Ontario, I've been around Ontario for a while. So one day I'll have to come and see you in Florida, I hope. That'd be really nice, won't it? So we met through hypnosis some years ago. And then you started a group called Healing Solutions for Pet Loss. And I was still grieving my lovely Sky dog. So it felt very appropriate. And that's how we sort of, I don't know, I think we did podcasts together. We did a few things over the years, didn't we? And then I remember getting an email from you saying, I'm going to write a book. And here we've got the book. Will you write a little bit about Sky Dog in it? So that was the very first time I'd ever been invited to write in somebody else's book. And it is beautiful. It's called Healing Solutions for Pet Loss. Goodbye is not forever. The roadmap to finding love and light again. And it really is a truly beautiful book, Kenda, isn't it? Really, really lovely. Now,
I I put a lot into it to help people, Sue. You
yeah.
know, there's so many people that are lost when it comes to grief.
Absolutely. And I think your group on Facebook is really helpful. I mean, I know people come in and they talk about their loss and they might do that for a year or maybe two, and then they move on and they reinvest their emotional energy and yeah, and you've
As
got
they
this,
should.
as they should, and this constant flow. And I don't know, will you tell people why you started the group? And I know it's a sad story, but it's the reason that we're here today talking about grief and loss, isn't it?
Well, and Susie, isn't it interesting how grief and loss and death is such a taboo subject?
It is.
And it should be a main subject. I always said I wish that grief was a class in school for children,
I
because
agree.
then they would be properly imprinted and know how to deal with the emotions that are attached to a loss.
Mm.
So I lost my girl back in 2017. And what was really, really difficult about it, she was only 2 years old. She came on stage and performed with me. I'm a stage hypnotist. And she was an old soul dog. She was 2 years old, but she was so mature for a 2-year-old. I could take her anywhere. We would go to huge, huge shows where there'd, be tens of thousands of people, and she would just walk right along like a little old lady. She didn't have that silliness in her. She was an old soul. And I started out June 12th, started out like any other day, and I got to work. And Jim, my partner at the time, he started teasing her and playing with her and saying, "Oh, you want to go outside? You want to go outside?" and getting her all hyper and hyped up. And there were squirrels outside, and I remember her knocking over her water bowl and running towards the door. And he opened the door, and the office was located out in the country, so very seldom would you see any cars or trucks moving along the road. And just at that time, a rabbit jumped out from underneath the porch. She took off after the rabbit and got hit by an 18-wheeler. It was an awful, awful, awful day, time. Um, and I can still remember like just being in shock and not even like screaming in my head and not even being able to get the words out, and at the same time angry at Jim for teasing her and kind of causing this to happen. Um there was a lot of emotions, that I had to deal with. And back in 2017, I didn't see support for people who had lost a pet. There was
Yeah.
lots of human support, if you'd
Yeah.
lost a loved one, a human loss, but not for pet loss. And I thought someday I'm going to do something about that. But I was in so much pain that it just, I had to heal.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have a very strong background in grief. I've had a lot of loss in my life, but I always managed to find help. I went to grief groups. I became interested in hospice and palliative care. I took grief facilitator courses. So somehow I was able to work through those emotions and kind of heal myself, I guess, get journey through, what we have to journey through to get on the other side of sadness. And I decided one day I just kind of woke up and, we all have a calling in life. And my calling is to help the less fortunate. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to form a group. Everybody knows from a marketing perspective, in order to sell your book, you need to have a Facebook group, which we all, as you market, you realize the importance of that. So I created a private group for pet loss, and didn't do it alone. Had help from other people helping me grow the group, and watch this group grow and grow and grow. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, it's time to write the book. So I took a book writing course, Richard Nongard, shout out to him, and wrote the book. And it kind of became my Bible. And I looked at it and I saw how it was helping people. And it changed my life, Susie. I started doing Zoom group sessions with people where we would meet once a week and just talk about their pet loss and talk about their emotions and how they can get past the sadness and move into opening their heart up to love again.
Yeah. Yeah. Does buying a new pet actually solve the problem?
It depends on what type of a person you are. I can remember years ago, I lost one of my Great Danes. I used to raise Great Danes. And the next day, my husband came home with a puppy. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me?
Mm.
His way of dealing with my grief, and I guess his own grief, was, well, let's just get another one and it'll make everything better. And that's not for everybody, but it was for him.
Yeah.
And me being a compassionate person, eventually I did fall in love with this puppy.
Yeah.
But I still had to deal with my own grief. So I guess the best answer to that question is it just depends on your personality and what works for you. I couldn't buy another dog. It took me 3 years to get another dog after Stella died.
Yeah. Yeah. I know after Sky, I think I was probably about 4 months without a dog. It killed me. I didn't know how to live without having a dog, and I really didn't. And we just rescued 2 cats, so, and we still have one who's very demented now, but and on his way out, quite frankly. But they just didn't cut it for me. I'm a dog person. I love my cats, but I am a dog person. So I had to buy a new dog. And because we're in rental accommodation, it had to be a small dog. And I've always rescued, but I couldn't rescue a dog to rescue old cats. So anyway, so I bought Oreo, and she's absolutely gorgeous. Love her to bits. But at first I couldn't bond with her. I could love her because she was a beautiful puppy, but the
Yes.
bonding was different because
Yes.
I was still sore and raw about Sky, who was my soul dog.
Yep.
And, and I didn't buy her to replace him. I bought her to fill the hole.
I love that expression, Susie.
Yeah,
I love that expression.
because there was a big dog hole in me and I needed something to fill it. So we bought Oreo, and I have to say that it took me a good year, maybe more, to bond with her. And then when I bonded with her, I mean, we are like one person, really. You know, Mary had a little lamb, Susie's got the Oreo, you know. So.
And it's interesting, right? Because you still have that love for Sky,
I
and you
do, yeah.
still have that sadness for Sky,
Yeah,
but there's another part of your heart that has embraced Oreo,
yeah,
and there's no substitute for
there's
the
no.
loss of your beautiful Sky, but there's a new love for Oreo.
And to
And
be honest, I'd have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dogs and love them all equally.
that's hard for people to understand when their loss is so fresh. And to
Yeah,
be honest, I probably would have gotten a pup sooner, but Jim just couldn't.
no.
He suffered so terribly with guilt, so
Yeah.
terribly with guilt, just over causing that accident. So it took 3 years
For
in
him.
order for him to be able to say, okay, I'm cool
Mm.
with this.
It's interesting that you raise Great Danes. I used to raise Yorkshire Terriers. I mean, small dogs. You're big, long-legged. Oreo loves
Oh,
long-legged dogs. And
love Danes. They're heartbreakers though, because they don't live a long life.
no, they don't. Too tall. Yeah. Anyway, one day I got a phone call. I got a litter that I was selling. And this lovely old man phoned me, old, probably my age, you know, but at the time I was only in my 30s. And he said, I've got to be really honest with you because you might not want to sell me a pup. And he told me a very devastating story of the fact that he'd left the house, shut the door, and got in his car and reversed out the drive. Unfortunately, he didn't know, and his wife didn't know the puppy had got out and followed him.
Oh my God, Susie.
Yeah. I mean, it's a devastating story. And I said, out of everybody that I could sell a dog to, I know very well that, you know, you'll be so obsessive about it. There was no
Oh,
way that could,
absolutely.
you know. So I understood his guilt, but I also understood his process. And I was so impressed by his ability to take full responsibility, even though it was an accident and even though there was no intention, like with Jim. I mean, that was nothing in his mind. He was playing with his girl. And,
Absolutely.
you know, it was just an incident
Mhm.
that occurred. And she lost her life, and that little puppy lost its life. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure it's probably had many more pets since, you know, but yeah, it's
And and we have to get to that point, right? And that's part of the reason why I opened up the pet loss Facebook group, is to just letting people know, look at the definition of an accident. It's
yeah,
not something that's done on purpose.
no,
And it's so easy to look at situations with our present mindset and
yeah.
judge ourselves on things that happened in the past.
Absolutely. And we have to forgive ourselves. And I think with Sky, I think a lot of my guilt did I give him euthanasia too soon? Because in my mind, I still see him as a young, able dog. Fortunately, my husband said he was really struggling with life. And you asked him to show you, and it took him a long time to show me. But it was really interesting because we've lost Simba, my cat, not that long ago, actually. And bless him. and and he waited. He kept showing me that he was ready to be put down. I used to lay in front of the door. He used to lay wherever I was going to have to walk, I'd have to step over him. He was screaming, please, will you do what you need to do? And I was ignoring him because, you know, because of my guilt about putting Sky down so too early. And I didn't, but I still have it mentally that I did. Anyway, one day I got up and he'd laid in the litter tray, and it was a fouled litter tray. And I said, that's your final message, mate, isn't it? And I
Yeah,
think that, you know, and we've spoken since, and he's told me that he waited so that I didn't feel any guilt about it.
I
And
love that,
that's
Susie.
how intelligent animals are.
Oh, They are. We're the ones that are the nincompoops.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I can remember, I had this little beautiful Persian cat, and I would force feed her. I would take a syringe and baby pablum and force feed her when she stopped eating. And it was interesting. Well, I think we're going to get into another part of my life, but um, you just, when a person is actively dying, you can't give them food.
Yeah.
And our instincts are to, oh my gosh, you need to eat, you need to
Mm,
drink.
mm,
If you don't, you're going to die. And it's like, no, the body is showing us that it's preparing for that next transition.
yeah.
And we can't be the one stopping that next
Yeah.
step, but we do. We do with our pets and we do with humans,
I
just
think
out of ignorance.
I think so. And there is a protocol for not feeding people that are in the dying phases, and it was it's called the Liverpool Pet Care Pathway, and it was cleared and it was stopped. But I think that something similar has come back. I'm out of the field now, so I can't remember. And that was around not force feeding and not giving medication and injections to people that are dying,
Let
but
let
it's
nature take its course.
and this is it, and with Maverick and with Simba, we're allowing them to, until they're really clear that they can't have a quality of life, and then we will give them euthanasia because it's the easiest thing. But it's interesting. You talk about grief. We've talked a little bit about animal grief, my grief, Stella grief, and all of that. But you've just been through one of the most difficult times of your life, my love, haven't you?
I have, and a lot of it's kind of a big secret in the hypnosis world.
Are you happy to share it here?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people didn't know that I was married to Jim Wand, and it didn't actually become public knowledge until I wrote his obituary and signed it Kenda Wand. People had no idea.
And because I'm British and I know you're Canadian American, so can you tell us a little bit about Jim Wand, your beloved?
Jim Jim was I call him a goat, one of the greatest of all times.
Oh,
Just
lovely.
an incredible stage hypnotist. He had done the business for over 30 years. Um, he's never counted the amount of shows he did, but probably well over 12,000.
Mhm.
It's interesting as I'm getting stronger and able to go through his things. I'm finding newspaper clippings of where he was doing 350 shows a year, Susie.
Wow.
350 shows a year. And the way he was able to accomplish that is he bought airplanes because he couldn't fly commercially and get from one state to another state.
Of course not.
So when he bought his own planes and hired pilots, he could do 3 shows in one night. And he was just a machine. If you know anything about the Enneagram, he was an
Yeah.
Enneagram 3. And so very driven, very focused on success. And he just absolutely killed it as far as the stage hypnosis arena goes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And
Does he have a YouTube presence? Is it something people can look at Jim's work?
yes, he is on YouTube.
Lovely.
He's got the one thing that was really cool about Jim is the big faux pas in the stage hypnosis world is you're not supposed to do body catalepsy. And that's where we hypnotize somebody to make them stiff and rigid
Mm.
and then lay them down between 2 chairs and then
Yeah.
have somebody stand on top of them.
Okay.
I actually did that with a former business partner that I had in Ottawa, but we went to a gym and we found a guy who was like buff, you know, abs of steel type thing. And we hypnotized him and hypnotized him and hypnotized him and conditioned him. And then when we brought him out in, you know, to do the demonstration, he had already been deepened so much. So we just did like a light trance on him, placed him, you know, between the two chairs safely, and brought this little 98-pound girl to stand on top of his abs. And everybody's like, oh, well, you know, outstanding. But we're not supposed to do that because we can lose our insurance for doing things like that because people got carried away with it. So what Jim would do is he would hypnotize himself. And he's got YouTubes of him hypnotizing himself very, very quickly, getting, usually he would use his pilots because he had two of them. They would place him between the chairs. Like you'd have one chair in the nape of your neck and the other chair on like the back of your feet. And he would have like 200 or 300-pound guys stand on top of him.
Wow. Wow.
So he just took things to another level. And he probably did that demonstration over 200 times.
Wow.
And it ended up hurting his back. He said the amount of chairs, like sometimes when you do these things at colleges or universities, they have those metal chairs. And he said we would snap chairs because of the weight of the basketball player or the football player that they would place on top of him.
God.
Oh, he would just take things to the extreme. So yeah, he has some pretty cool videos out there. He's worked with a lot of Sylvester Stallone. He did a movie in Dubuque, Iowa, and he couldn't remember his lines. So they called Jim in to work with him so that he could remember his lines.
Wow.
So had a relationship with Sylvester Stallone. I could go on and on and on about him, Susie. He was just an amazing, amazing man. And anybody who knows stage hypnosis or hypnosis has heard of him or been directly involved with Jim through his agency.
And I think what we've just done for everybody that's watching is done something that's quite taboo. And that is ask people to talk about their loved ones that are lost. Mention their names, tell the stories, because it's such a powerful thing. And we just don't do that. In the UK, people cross the street because they don't know what to say, you know, and asking like, what do you think Jim would have thought of that? And would Jim put the painting just there or whatever it was, you know? And it's like speaking about the dead. I speak about Sky all the time, you know, and I probably more than my parents and everybody else that's died in my life, really. But and I think we need to keep them alive in our memory and the legacy that they left. So I think this is really beautiful for you to talk about Jim in this way. And
It needs to be normalized. It needs to be, you know, we need to talk about death as much as we talk about the birth of a newborn baby.
absolutely.
You know?
First breath, last breath.
Right. And it's such an uncomfortable discussion for a lot of people. And I don't think you become comfortable with it, Susie, until you have a lot of loss.
I think you're right. But also culturally, we don't give permission slips.
Yes.
And we really must give each other permission. And a friend of mine, actually, who I'm supporting as a friend who's lost her husband as well. And she's doing this amazing thing. She started journaling, which she'd never journaled before. And so she writes in a book about her day. And then I think she sections off a piece of every day's page. And this is where she writes a memory of Colin.
Beautiful.
And she writes a little story about her memory of him. And it's really helping her to, if you like, to let the emotions free. And this is something you teach, isn't it, in your pet loss group? Do you want to tell people how to grieve, Kenda? Because I know you're very sore yourself, but
Absolutely, Susie. And I have a book here that I do the same thing in. I journal about Jim, and I have been journaling about him since he died.
yeah,
Journaling is so important for so many reasons. Number one, we forget about those little things.
Yeah.
We forget about those memories. We forget about those happy times. So when you're sitting there and all of a sudden something strikes you like, oh gosh, I remember when we went and we did that, and that was so much fun. It's so nice to be able to have your book, or if you don't have your book, grab your phone and press record and just make yourself a little message, because it is amazing how quickly we will forget those memories.
Yeah.
Those memories.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I have a bunch of voicemails where I would message people as Jim was transitioning and tell them about different things that he was doing. And the other night, because I don't sleep well, so the other night I was listening to some of those messages, and I forgot things that happened to him, like spiritually, just these amazing, amazing things that you can't explain. You know, that the dead are seeing or visualizing, you know, other entities in the room, and I forgot all about them,
Yeah.
because I think our mind does that to just kind of save ourselves from hurting, right? We store those memories in a different compartment of our mind. And it just amazed me, the stuff that I was forgetting about. So I thought, oh, I need to journal about that. I need to write that stuff down. Incredible, incredible things. So I highly, highly encourage everybody to journal. People will say, oh, but I'm not a writer. I don't know what to write. Anything, happy memories, sad memories, anger. This particular book I got from one of my grief groups that I joined, and I'm a Christian. So just depending on what your religious denomination is, at the very back of the book, it asks some interesting questions. And it'll say, like, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling any of these things?
Oh, that's
And
useful.
so it gives you an idea of, okay, today I feel furious. So then it'll ask you to talk about that fury. You know, why are you feeling furious? Or today I feel ashamed. So this is just a wonderful, wonderful book. And then it has some psalms at the back of the book, that can just give you a little bit of that virtual hug that you need to have. So journaling has totally saved me, Susie, and I can't emphasize it enough for any type of loss.
Yeah.
Pet loss, human loss, a divorce. You know, you think grief has to be the loss of a life. It can be a divorce, it can be a move, it can be a child moving out of the house, loss of a job.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I had a spiritual moment of awakening to grief the other day, and it was not something that, well, it was last month actually, and it was around grieving not a person or another human, nothing like that. It was about the grief that lives inside us of what we haven't achieved, or that we were prevented from doing. And it's regret, it's many things, but it's a grief, and it's like embedded in cells. And if we don't allow this grief out, and that's why that book's really useful to actually explore the emotion. I mean, Kubler-Ross gave us 5 pointers for grief. I don't agree with them. I don't disagree with them, but I don't believe that it's a linear experience. And I think journaling means that today I can feel guilty, tomorrow I can feel fine, and the next day I can feel complete guilt and shame, and it's such a cyclic thing. And I mean, he died in 2015, so it's 8 years since he died, but he's still in my heart every day.
You know, it's interesting. I have this wonderful, wonderful counselor, and she said to me, she said, Kenda, she says, we're going to talk counselor to counselor now. She says, you know, she said, when I lost my husband, she says, I was 3 years seeing a counselor. She goes, would I say that to a freshly grieving person? No, she goes, I wouldn't. But she goes, I want you to understand that.
Yeah.
She said, it takes years and years and years.
Yeah.
And, you know, that just kind of hit me, because we're not supposed to talk about how long it takes,
Yeah.
but the process is rushed. right, Susie? Everybody wants us to get back to being ourselves and
Yeah.
living that life again. And our whole purpose has changed after a loss. We don't know who we are. We don't know what we're going to do with our life. And that loss, I mean, I'm talking a dog, I'm talking a cat, I'm talking a horse, I'm talking a gerbil, I'm talking a rabbit.
Yeah.
I get very passionate about one of the reasons why I wanted to specialize with pet loss is I'd be in the human groups and they were really poo-pooing pet loss. It's like, how dare you compare the loss of your cat to my Joe that I had for 30 years. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Wait a second. Like, what if that gentleman, that cat, he doesn't have any children, he doesn't have a wife, and that cat's his child. You
Yeah.
know, how dare you tell him that his loss isn't as important as yours is? And that was my reason for opening up a group so people could feel that rawness of that grief.
Yeah.
Don't compare losses. Don't compare losses. And if somebody, you know, is poo-pooing your loss of your pet, then let them be. Let them be, you know.
Yeah.
In my mind, all loss matters. And I don't care if it's a pet, if it's your mother, if it's your grandmother, if it's your newborn baby, all loss matters.
Absolutely. And it isn't about longevity
Uh-uh.
of relationship. It's real for you. And I think this is from our perspective as therapists, we want people to experience their feelings and not push them in and push them in and push them in. Because when you push your feelings in, it hardens like a rock and it makes you sick. And, you know,
One
and
day you explode like a volcano
absolutely.
and you don't know why.
Yeah. And it doesn't make sense at all. And then you just think you've gone mad,
Yeah.
when in truth, you've just had a big outpouring of all of that stuff. So at the end of every video, I just do a moment of calm, just a moment of breathing and focus and mindfulness. Because if we get into a practice of that, and even if it's a grieving practice, you know, that we actually every day commit a minute or two just to being silent and allowing the mystery of our own wisdom to just shine through. And I know when I lost a lot of people, I was made orphan quite young and in my early 40s, and I lost my mum, my dad, my mum, and my best friend. One moved off to Australia, and my daughter went to university all at the same time. And it was like my whole world had broken down. And you need the connection of other people, but you need to process it. I didn't. I was so busy organizing everything, all the certificates, and you know what it's like writing the
Running from
obituary.
it.
Terrible, isn't it? And
Yep.
I did not give myself permission to feel the grief of all of that loss that was condensed. And it made me ill. And I think that, you know, your body will tell you one way or another. So we must, I think if anybody can take anything from our conversation, is you've got permission from Kenda and Susie to feel your grief and reach out. That was something we were talking about earlier, wasn't it? How you reached out to people. Do you want to
I
talk a bit about
had
that?
to. I had to, Susie. I had to. I joined two grief groups. I see counselor once a week, and it's kept me sane.
Yeah.
It's kept me sane, and I understand grief. I know what I'm going through, but isn't there an expression that the cobbler's children never had shoes?
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, you've got to know that in order to get past that sadness, you need somebody to hold your hand, and it's okay. It's okay.
Absolutely, it is okay. And I think that there is an exchange when we have a therapist or a counselor, and it's a financial exchange. And it's, you know, this is an investment in your long-term future, because
Oh,
otherwise, you know, the sickness might cost you your job. You know, who knows what if we don't deal with our grief. what will happen. So yeah.
It'll come back to haunt you 100%. And sometimes I'll poke into the human loss groups, because I took a certification course from David Kessler. A lot of people probably know that name. And so he has a bunch of groups that I'm part of. And every now and then I'll pop into them. I don't like to stay in that arena too much, because it's just too hard for me right now. But it's interesting. And I'll make a few comments, like people will say, well, I just lost my granddaughter, and it's the worst pain I've ever had. And I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I'll comment and I'll say, well, how many other losses have you had in your life? Is it just your granddaughter? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you have to understand that every loss you've ever had in your life, everything that's made you sad, everything that's broken your heart, you've got to deal with that. And if you don't, all of that pain is going to rear its ugly head and present itself when you've lost your granddaughter. And that's why you could potentially be in so much pain, because how many people have done the self-work, Susie?
Well, there's a very big question, isn't there? And I don't think people have been given permission to do the self-work. I think that's the truth, that people don't know there is self-work to do. And, and I certainly, from an educational perspective, even a Christian perspective, which we both have in our traditions, it doesn't really talk about that in clear terminology. Personal and spiritual development is, still perceived by many as woo-woo and as unnecessary, and just, certainly in the British tradition, stiff upper lip, and just soldier on and all of that.
Get on with life. I mean, in the olden days, a widow wore black for a year, so that people recognized that she was grieving. And it was at that 1-year anniversary that she was allowed to, wear colors again. But it was a symbolization of a broken heart and a person going through a transition. Now you look around, you can't tell if somebody's grieving or not.
No, and also we've sanitized. I'm assuming it's the same in the States. We've sanitized death, birth and death, really, and sickness. We've always sort of historically laid our dead in state on the kitchen table or the dining room table or the parlor, as you were telling me earlier, and we've had our wake there and we've spoken. There's a lovely, I bet I can't remember who it is. Oh, here we are. Mitch Albom, I think it is.
Oh, Tuesdays with Maury, my favorite book.
Tuesdays with Maury.
That is a movie absolutely everybody should watch. That was part of my palliative care program. We had to watch that movie. He's amazing, Mitch Albom. Amazing.
And For One More Day, which is lovely as well. And I think one of the things about that was that Maury actually had his wake while he was alive.
Yes.
And if I get that privilege, I will do the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The one thing that is amazing is how many people are private messaging me about Jim and saying, because he used to be a school counselor before he became a hypnotist.
Right.
And it's just like, you have no idea what Jim did for me. My brother and I grew up in, we were being abused by our father, and he helped my brother and I get through school. And I just have story after story after story of all these people that Jim helped. And the sad part is, Susie, I say to myself, is I don't think he knew how much he was loved.
Really?
He's so busy making a living as an Enneagram 3, not connected to any emotions whatsoever. And I don't think he realized how much he was loved, and how sad. So I love, like you said, like Maury did, have your funeral before you go.
Absolutely.
Let those people come in and send you those messages and send you those phone calls telling you what you did and how you impacted their life. I know people in my grief group that I've impacted their life, that I've stopped them from committing suicide. I've received those messages.
Yeah.
And it just changed me knowing that the little things that I'm doing, and I don't feel like they're huge things, Susie, but they're helping somebody else. They're helping
Absolutely.
somebody else.
And
And
this
what an
is your
amazing thing
heart.
for us all to know, right?
Yeah.
That what we've done on this earth has helped another individual.
Absolutely. And every experience we have is a story we can tell that another person needs to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest hope, Susie, is, don't lie in that darkness of grief. It's awful. And we need to lie in it, and we need to experience it. And we need to cry, we need to scream, we need to be angry. But always look on the other side, and what's your purpose now?
Yeah.
Who do you want to become because of what you've experienced with your grief and with your loss?
And
Like,
it's
don't stop living.
absolutely. And we were just talking before we came on air about the difficulty being the plus one. you
Oh,
know, yeah.
yes.
What did you call it? The third cog in the
The
wheel?
third wheel, the
The
third wheel.
third wheel.
Yeah, I live in a 55 plus community, and it's really tough here. Not really tough. I've got amazing neighbors, beautiful neighbors. If I don't pick my newspaper up by a certain time, I'm getting text messages.
Are you all right?
Did you fall? Is everything all right? Like they're just beautiful souls.
Yeah.
But when we go out and we have activities, and there's dancing involved, and there's slow dancing involved, I'm picking up my phone or I'm leaving, because I find it very difficult. One of the things that where I can see my own growth, Susie, that I'm healing, because Jim passed away August 2nd, last year.
Yeah.
August 8th, not August 2nd, August 8th. And one of the ways that I know I'm growing is I wrote to these singles group, because there's a bunch of singles. And I said, hey, you know what, guys, like, I'm a hypnotist, and I don't like this segregation between singles and couples. How about we gather as a group, and I do a group hypnosis session, giving you all confidence, and giving you all that I call them mind modalities, Susie, like the tapping, and just all the anti-anxiety tools like Melissa Tears talks about,
Yeah.
things that we can do for people to help them become more outgoing,
Yeah.
and not feel like they're single. You can be single, but you can also enjoy yourself in a group. So I'm starting to come out of my capsule, so to speak, and getting back to my roots. And I know that I should be. I know that it's time. I know that that's my purpose.
Absolutely. And that's the reinvestment of your emotional energy, isn't it? To use Kubler-Ross's thinking. So I think we've been on call probably about 30 minutes. I'm not, my just doesn't tell me. So is there anything else
A lot
you...
of information in here, a lot of good information, and I think people will enjoy just learning a little bit more about grief and loss, and how to become comfortable with it.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you would like to say? I will put the links to the wonderful book.
That's my book. It's available on Amazon, and there's lots of links in there to my pet loss group. It's a private group, so you can't necessarily find it on Facebook. And I'm not doing the Zoom sessions anymore, because I'm running Jim's company, Wand Enterprises. It's a agreement that I was kind of thrown into at the last few days of his life, but I have a lot of support from some wonderful people telling me, you can do this, Kenda. So it's a way to keep Jim's name alive and to carry on the legacy that he's created.
That's wonderful. Kenda, it's lovely to be your friend. Do you know you've mentioned something twice, maybe 3 times, called the Enneagram? And I was wondering if you will come back later on in the year and have a sofa chat about the Enneagram.
I love the Enneagram. Yeah, let's do
Good.
it. Do
I
it.
can never work out if I'm a 7 or a 9, I think, and I just I've never been able to sort of
Oh,
quite work out which one I am, so I'll let you help me with that.
well, I'm a 2.
Right.
Live to serve. So, yes, let's do that. I think that'd be fascinating.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now, Kenda.
You
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching. And
have
all
an
of the details will be below, and you know how to get hold of me if you've got any questions. And if you go on Amazon, you'll find out a little bit more about Kenda as well there. So look forward to seeing you later for our meditation. Thank you. And as we reflect for a moment on all we've heard, and as we remember the power of those emotions that we've felt in our lives, and how somehow miraculously we moved on from that time. We've reinvested our emotional energy and found balance again. And if we now just focus in on our breath, knowing that it is the doorway to health, it is a path of regulation where we can regulate our emotions through the breath with intention. We can move from feeling anxious to feeling calm, from feeling hurt to feeling forgiveness, to feeling angry to feeling peace. We are wonderful human beings with great ability to feel. And as we allow our breath to carry us through that feeling, we heal ourselves. With every breath we take. And as we take control of our emotions through the breath, we begin to live a wholesome, peaceful life. And now just reorient yourself to the room, the sounds, the scents, the feeling of your clothes on your skin, and notice the breath as it leaves your body. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Put your hand on your heart, just for a moment, and just experience that peace and calm. And say thank you to yourself for all you are.